It's a great honor to have you here at Exponential Manufacturing.
It's my pleasure.
First at one of our summits, so it's really exciting. So I wanted to kick off. You had a very big announcement yesterday. So Google yesterday announced a new version of Smart Reply, their machine learning email software. And I wanted to I think this will be your first time to be able to publicly talk about it, and be terrific to hear a little bit from you about why that's significant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people ask me, is it different working for a big company than having my own startup? This was my first job that I took over 4 years ago. And it is pretty much the same in that nobody tells me what algorithms to use, and I've had a lot of freedom that way. When Larry Page recruited me, I gave him a copy of How to Create a Mind, and he says, we've got these great resources, the best of which is the talent there. And so I have a very talented team. We collaborate with other teams. What I went there for is what I talk about in How to Create a Mind, which is a little bit different version of deep learning. We use deep learning algorithms, but it's in the context of hierarchical models, and that's my model of how the neocortex works. It's a hierarchy of modules. Each module can recognize a pattern, and it self-organizes into a hierarchy. And the world is hierarchical. The neocortex invented language, which is hierarchical, so I can take an idea, which is a hierarchy of symbols in my neocortex, and transmit it to yours. We needed a hierarchical transmission channel to do that, so we invented language. So we've been developing these hierarchical models. It's a crude approximation of how we think the neocortex works. It seems to have some semantic ability. We're trying to assess exactly how much, but so that is now in this new version of Smart Reply, which anybody here who has Gmail, you'll see it as of yesterday. It'll suggest 3 replies, polite replies, to your emails. Exciting thing about being at Google is you can announce a product and it's used by 1 billion people, a few hours later.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Can't do that as a startup. Well.
Great, thank you. Well, looking forward to trying that. So. You've often talked about the change, and we talk about it at Singularity University. Change just doesn't come from one exponential, right? It's the convergence of multiple exponentials where a lot of times you have major breakthroughs. I'd be curious, specifically kind of thinking about the manufacturing sector, are there any combination of exponentials that you think are going to lead to some, or already are, or in the near future might lead to some really significant breakthroughs?
Well, pretty much all of the exponential information technologies feed into manufacturing. Certainly, deep learning and artificial intelligence is already utilized in supply chains and designing products, designing how to manufacture them. 3D printing is going to be very directly in the process of making products. A little bit later, the resolution will get down to the atomic level. That's maybe 2030s, we'll do the atomically precise manufacturing that Drexler envisioned in 1986. The exponential process that I mentioned in biology certainly affects manufacturing, because many products have a biological component to them, and manufacturing drugs and any kind of biological product, like agricultural products, will be transformed by that exponential technology. Energy is important in manufacturing, and I mentioned that exponential process. So it's hard to think actually of an exponential technology that doesn't feed into the manufacturing sector.
How do you think about consumer adoption in that piece? So you talk obviously a lot about technologies and how technological change is going to drive change. How do you, when you're making your predictions, think about the role of consumer adoption?
Well, that's one of the somewhat unpredictable aspects of it. Despite that, it's really remarkable how the very core measurements of price performance, like calculations per second per constant dollar, which is a measure of the price performance of computation, or the number of bits we move around wirelessly, or the cost of sequencing a base pair of DNA, they follow amazingly predictable trajectories. And I don't say that by backfitting past data last week. I mean, I made these forward-looking predictions starting in the early 80s. That tracks extremely well. So you can Google how my predictions are faring, Kurzweil, and you'll get this 150-page analysis of 147 predictions I made in 1999. She made them in the late 90s. They came out in the Age of Spiritual Machines in 99, about the year 2009. So the ones that have to do with the price performance of computing will be such are right on the mark. 86% were correct, but the ones that were incorrect was, for example, we'll have self-driving cars. So there were self-driving cars in the world in 2009, but that was still wrong because they weren't really ubiquitous. You could argue whether we have them today. People are starting to use them. So that involves regulation, consumer adoption, concerns about safety. Those are a little harder to predict than just the price, performance, and capacity of different information technologies. So the law of accelerating returns is the basis of my brand of futurism. I have a rich imagination, so I'm constantly imagining things. Writing gives me an opportunity to invent with the technologies of the future. The ones that involve consumer adoption and things like regulation are a little less predictable, but still directionally, we're very much on track.
So I want to build on that and ask you just a couple questions about you as a human being. And so do you spend a lot of your time, kind of blue sky thinking, trying to dream up, the future? Like, what does a week look like, or how do you incorporate that element into your life?
Well, my creative thinking is done at night. I assign myself a problem when I go to sleep. It could be, should I do this deal? Should I hire this person? Like a question, or it could be, how am I going to articulate this in a book, or what algorithm should I use for this problem? It could be a math problem, a relationship issue, and I try not to solve it, because that'll turn off the creative thinking. Now, Freud said that in your dreams, the sensors, CENSORs, are relaxed. That's why you'll dream about things that are culturally taboo, for example. Well, there are also professional taboos. You can't solve a signal processing problem with those formulas, and linguistics doesn't use those rules, so that's all relaxed. And when I wake up, I'll find myself thinking about this problem I primed myself before I went to sleep and dreaming about it in very strange ways. Now, there's something else that doesn't work in your dreams, which is your rational faculties. So when the elephant comes through the wall, the strangest thing about it is that you don't think it's strange in your dream. Okay, the elephant came through the wall. Can't really evaluate these ideas while you're dreaming. The next stage is kind of a lucid dream stage where you're still in the dream, you have the dream feelings, the dream ideas, but you're also aware that you're, for example, in a bed. And now you have your rational faculties and these strange dream ideas, and I'll try to interpret them in a way that reflects on the problem. Doesn't always work, but very often I'll come up with some new insight, confidence in a decision. I'll spend the morning then writing a patent application or a memo to my colleagues. When I go through the day, I'm just kind of carrying out my dream decisions, and otherwise going through the daily rituals of maintaining this version 1.0 biological body.
That's fascinating. I appreciate that. Amazing. Just like my day. So I wanted to ask, on the manufacturing front, is there anything in particular kind of device-wise that you might imagine kind of 10 years from now being part of everyone's home? Some sort of new technology that we haven't seen yet, but you think is coming down?
Well, I think technology is going to become increasingly invisible. I mean, there's been a big movement to, mobile everywhere and mobile first. But actually, mobile devices, in my opinion, are very frustrating. You're trying to look through the world through a keyhole, and it's very hard to enter data on them. I mean, it's great we carry them around, but what if we made the whole world your display? I think that's where we're headed. We'll be in augmented reality all the time. So you can have a big display if you want, or you could have a friend sitting there even if she's hundreds of miles away.
You think people are wearing glasses, goggles? Or?
Well, right now they're kind of bulky. I think they need to become streamlined. There are projects that try to do that. Glasses, contact lenses. The 2030s will go inside the nervous system with nanorobots providing signals to your brain as if they were coming from the sensors. But over the next 10 years, it will be increasingly efficient, seamless devices. So the whole world will be our display. We'll have different ways of interacting with that. We'll be used to being in augmented reality all the time. We won't be carrying these sort of little devices around. So these are really a transition. So I think that's the future of interacting with technology. It'll be increasingly seamless and kind of part of our world.
Great. So I think that might be kind of a nice opportunity to transition and take a few questions from the audience. So going to ask anyone who would like to ask Ray a question just to raise their hand. We've got mic runners who will make it out there. So anyone want to lob in a first question?
So Ray, you mentioned that you had a personal close connection with the Israeli Prime Minister, and something that we haven't yet heard about in terms of comparison of innovation and driving that innovation mindset. Can you touch on a few considerations that Israel has dubbed as the startup nation, the size of New Jersey in both population and size? How do we as employers, as communities and policymakers translate that kind of mindset to drive the innovation in the same trend that Israel has?
Yeah, well, I knew some of the early venture capitalists who kind of opened up Israel for venture capital. Ken Rind is one name that comes to mind. But Israel certainly has been a Silicon Valley of the Middle East. Silicon Valley has become a metaphor. It's a mindset that there's no such thing as failure. Failure is success deferred. Another word for failure is experience. And Israel certainly has been remarkably creative in every aspect of technology. But as I go around the world, people point out, oh, our neighborhood is the Silicon Valley of Paris, and our neighborhood's the Silicon Valley of China or Beijing. It's tremendous entrepreneurial activity in China, really all around the world. You're right that Israel is a landmark. They've got some very exciting medical technologies. I swallowed a computer a few weeks ago, which was a diagnostic device developed in Israel. Seemed to do a good job and said I was okay. But I think this spirit of innovation is really spreading around the world. And I think discussions of one country versus another, I mean, they're interesting. They have some impact, but basically it's one world economy. And this model of sort of free thinking and spirit of invention is really spread around the world.
If everything's on an exponential trend, do we get to a point where the limitation is human adoption and human behavior in basically every facet?
I don't see that as a limitation at all. People keep predicting that, and as I said earlier, it's remarkable how quickly people adopt a change. They certainly don't resist medical changes. I had a debate with Bill McKibben, who's a noted environmentalist, and he's saying, well, I don't want to live past 95. And I said, well, you might think differently when you get to 95. And he thinks he's really opposed to life extension beyond a certain point. I said, well, you know, it's a shame that Mozart and Schubert died in their 30s. And he said, well, I don't really feel a lack of Schubert and Mozart symphonies. And I said, well, maybe you should listen to some more of them. But we keep really expanding our own capacity to understand the world and capacity for change by adopting these technologies and becoming smarter, and we'll do that very literally. So people say, well, there must be some limit to exponentials, and I do talk about that in the singularities near. The limit is the limit of matter and energy to either compute a bit, remember a bit, communicate a bit of information. It turns out to be vanishingly small, and we can multiply our own brain power, you know, trillions fold before we reach those limits based on our current understanding of the physics of computation.
I have the impression that I read that in 2099, your prediction is to have more cyborgs than humans on Earth. Can you elaborate a little bit about it?
Well, I think cyborgs means a combination of humans and technical enhancements, so that can't really exceed the number of humans. But we will have AIs that don't have a biological component. I think we will increasingly become non-biological. My scenario for the 2030s is we will connect our neocortex, which is this hierarchy of modules, to synthetic neocortex in the cloud. So just the way, I mean, this is billions of times more powerful than the computer I used when I came to MIT, but it can multiply itself a millionfold further by connecting to millions of computers in the cloud. We can't do that yet from our neocortex. We do it indirectly through these devices. We'll do it directly from our neocortex, not just to access search and translation from our neocortex, but actually access synthetic modules that act just like the biological ones. So then our thinking will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. However, the non-biological portion will be subject to the law of accelerating returns. The biological portion isn't improving very much at all. So over time, the non-biological portion will dominate. So we'll become, more non-biological than biological. But then when you add AIs that have no biological component, that would be a larger number of thinking entities than just biological humans.
You spoke a bit about lucid dreaming, and as far as I know, Tibetan yogis used dream yoga as a technique to get enlightened. My question is there any dialogue, any significant dialogue between the leaders of the world of technique and the spiritual leaders? And what is your opinion, how meaningful could be this dialogue?
Well, that's a great question. I think there is a spiritual dimension to the law of accelerating returns, and that it's a result of evolution. Basically, my thesis is a theory of evolution. And what happens in evolution? Well, entities get more complicated, they get more knowledgeable, they become more intelligent, more creative, more beautiful. If you actually look at entities in biological evolution, the beauty increases with evolution. Some people think reptiles are beautiful, but I think mammals are prettier. So how do we describe God? Well, there's many different religious viewpoints. I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist church where the thesis was many paths to the truth, and that reality is so profound that these apparently different stories really are talking about the same thing with different metaphors. And they all actually agree that God is what? An unlimited amount of all those attributes: knowledge, all-knowing, infinitely creative, all-loving, ultimate in beauty, and so on. So evolution never becomes infinite. It never becomes literally God, but it moves in that direction, becomes more godlike. So you can say that evolution is a spiritual process. Another viewpoint is as we go up this neocortical hierarchy, things get also more intelligent, more creative, more beautiful. At the very bottom of the neocortical hierarchy, I can tell that that's a straight line at the edge of the stage. At the top of the neocortical hierarchy, I can tell that, well, that's funny, that's ironic, she's pretty. So these transcendent emotions and spiritual feelings and our ability to express them in language and art and music are all as a result of going up the neocortical hierarchy. If you remember, 2 million years ago, we were walking around, we didn't have these big foreheads, so we didn't have the frontal cortex. So evolution gave us an additional quantity of neocortex. So what did we do with it? We're already doing a very good job of being primates, so we put it at the top of the neocortical hierarchy and made ourselves more spiritual, better able to be eloquent and articulate ourselves. We invented music. No other animal has music. Every human culture ever discovered has music. So there's a spiritual dimension. I think people that talk about spiritual qualities are talking about what happens at the top of our neocortex. And I think their insights and actual practical ways that we can enhance those qualities of human beings is quite valuable. And I think we're talking about the same thing. And I think it would be good to make a stronger connection between our sort of scientific models of how the brain works and understanding the transcendent things we do with our brain.
So Ray, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I want to thank you so much for your time today and for your insights. It's really a great pleasure and honor to have you here. Thank you. Thank you.